You're listening to Evenings.
My name's Dom Knight. You're on ABC Radio right around the country. We're going to head to Lebanon and find out really how you recover from that extraordinary explosion. And you've probably seen the video or the footage. If you haven't and you've got a device nearby, just jump on and have a look. The sheer scale of the devastation, the blast, but also the damage done to the port area in Beirut. It really was a terrible disaster. Hundreds of thousands of people displaced and many, many fatalities as well. We'll get into that in just a moment here on Evenings right after this song. Dom Knight with you on the Evening Show.
You're listening to ABC Radio.
You certainly are right around the country. On August the 4th, 2020, the world experienced one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history. It damaged over half the city of Beirut. It was, of course, that giant blast blamed on ammonium nitrate in a hangar, and it went up. You probably saw the footage. It was a huge fireball. And just over a year on, the people of the Lebanese capital and also the Lebanese community here in Australia are still grappling with the aftermath of this terrible tragedy which killed hundreds and displaced hundreds of thousands of people in Beirut. And the thing about big news stories like this and tragic moments is that the news cycle tends to move on. But it's really important to check in just to find out how people are travelling after these terrible things happen, both with the people back in Lebanon and the Lebanese community here, which of course is such a large and important part of the modern Australian story and how they're grappling with the aftermath of those explosions. So tonight we're joined by Bujar Hoxha. He's Country Director of Care International in Lebanon. He spoke to Serene at the time of the explosions and also 6 months later. And Bujar, it's a great pleasure to welcome you back on the program just over a year later. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Dom.
It's a great pleasure. We also have to speak about this from the perspective of the Australian Lebanese diaspora. We have Joanne Marie Lahoud. She's based here in Australia and she formed a group called Women from the East to give a voice to Middle Eastern women all around the world. Joanne Marie, thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
So, Bia, let's start with you. A fairly sombre anniversary, I imagine, when August 4th came around. How's everyone feeling about it at this point?
It's quite a difficult moment still to live with, Dom. So, what if we rewind back and we look, as you said, travel back in time? If we go just a week before August 4th, we were trying to explain to what was happening to Lebanon, the economic free fall, which didn't have to do with the global pandemics per se. And we were having this downward spiral, and we had more and more people going below poverty line. And then suddenly we have this explosion which hit at the commercial heart of Beirut. So 1 year later, we had this with the care team, we had this walk just to recollect some of the memories and to see how everyone feels, especially since knowing that big parts of the city that were hit by explosion are actually the quite essential for identity of Beirut. And people still live with the fear of August 4th, and their hearts are still broken as there's no accountability. And it's quite difficult to see when you walk through the different neighborhoods that only 30%, just below 30%, have returned back to their homes. So there's still this emptiness within that part of the Beirut, which was quite badly affected back in time.
So one of the most vibrant areas of the city, still a bit of a ghost town from what you're saying. What are the most immediate needs of the community there?
Well, the needs have actually increased quite dramatically. We have now Lebanon in quite different situation. I think it's but it's also proven by many of research studies that has taken place so far. It's facing the worst crisis since its foundation as a republic. People are suffering for basic elementary needs. You have food and medicine shortages. Water is also an acute need. Lebanese lira has depreciated, believe it or not, for 99%. You have lines for fuel, for bread, for medicaments, and this has lines for fuel. Medicaments have become a routine. You have power shortages of 23 hours out of 24, so not many small or medium businesses can survive. And just a week ago, last Friday, we had another different explosion, but this was with the petrol. People were queuing up in northern Lebanon in a city, Akkar, known as Akkar, and they were trying to secure basically fuel so they could sustain a little bit of power for their households, families. And this explosion killed 28 people, and there were more than 150 people injured. So, without going too much into other parts, it's already consisting of the humanitarian crisis, and it doesn't look very good. It looks a bit doom and gloom at the moment.
Yeah, it sounds as though the crisis has not really been alleviated since that awful day last year. But what do you think needs to happen at this point? If you were in charge, what would be the first things that you would do to try and recover from this situation? It may be a long list, I realise.
It's but it's a good question, Dom. The first, I think, is the leadership. There is a leadership crisis. It's been a year now since the explosion, but it's also a year since Lebanon has lost its last government. So this leaves Lebanese people in a country with limited or no services. And as I said to another colleague a few weeks ago, it feels like Lebanon feels like a kingdom of absence. You know, there is absence of everything. There is shortage of everything. Believe it, it's surreal even for humanitarian workers that we have served in a different conflict zones, like quite hardship countries. So it is. It needs first and foremost, I think it needs a leadership. It needs a government that would provide accountability for what has happened on the 4th of August. And it would provide a plan, a clear plan, outline a plan with concrete steps on how to undertake reforms so they could go out of this governance economic crisis which Lebanese are facing. It seems as by end of this year, we're going to have, if this continues, if the projection continues, we're going to have up to 70% of people below poverty line. And that's just too much. That's staggering figures.
You're hearing from Bujar Hoxha. He's the country director of Care International in Lebanon, from where he's joining us here on the evening show. And we also have with us Joanne Marie Lahoud, who's the founder of Women from the East, based here. Bujar, clearly, given the economic crisis, having the port in the capital city devastated by an explosion like this, and indeed much of the capital, that must have been especially devastating. How is the reconstruction going? And you mentioned that a lot of the housing was still empty, people hadn't moved back. But in terms of what we need for trade and to get shipping happening, I mean, how are things travelling over a year on?
Yeah, the parts of Beirut Port are still destroyed. So there is a reconstruction work going on. There is a lot of international donors that have come to aid to Lebanese people. However, it needs a major work, and it will take a multi-year. It will be a multi-year program, I think, multi-year project before that happens. And luckily for Lebanon, there is the other alternate port of Tripoli, which serves around 20% of Lebanon itself. But still, there is another alternative, and Beirut Port itself is still providing for quite, let's say, 60 up to 80% of it. It's operational, so it could survive. What Lebanon is really facing challenges with is how to get the goods, how to secure the goods. So the debts are so high they cannot secure any more subsidies for people. So that's why we have lines for food, for bread. Basically, you have lines for fuel. Fuel serves for the power in case of Lebanon. So it's how, besides the port, which is that logistical supply chain element, is that how they're going to make sure that everything is enabling environment so people can access directly the main needs and they basically
We're losing the line somewhat, Bujar. Bujar, from your perspective, what can Australians do to help? What would you like to see happen, I guess, both on an international level in terms of our government, but also in terms of members of our community here? What can people do?
Well, I think if there are, Lebanese have two hopes. They have very young population, and I'm hopeful that there is a potential there to transform the country. And secondly, it just goes to the heart of your question, is basically the diaspora community, and Lebanese Australians play major role in this direction, and I think they could be change leaders or change agents from afar in a country which needs this desperately, needs this massively. I mean, without the instituted changes in the country and without this fresh thinking, which could come from the Australian diaspora, this will not happen. Unfortunately, what we see as a trend these days is that besides the scarcity in the supplies and goods, we see also scarcity in the services, because many experts like doctors, professors, pharmacists, they are leaving, fleeing Lebanon for other countries and migrating further, which means that we face also another brain drain, which would just be too much for Lebanon to live with. So Australians and Lebanese Australians have a major role in terms of playing, in terms of supporting the Lebanese communities in their change processes and their proactive initiatives, in supporting the different civil society organizations, which range from those that seek accountability for August 4th to the ones that really support the basic necessities, like in food, medicine shortages, water shortages, and the rest. So they have a major, significant role to play, Dom.
Yeah, so the diaspora have a role, as you say. Great to talk about it, and I'm so sorry to hear that the problems are still as terrible as they are, that there's still so much to be done. But if we keep talking about it and keep supporting and keep building the friendship between the two countries, no doubt there are better days ahead. Bujar, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dom.
Instance.
And as I forgot to mention as well, if you want to support, if any Australian citizen feels the need to support, we have a Care Australia. They have been massive support to us when we responded in the first hour after the Beirut explosion. So thank you for having me.
Yes, of course, Care, very well known here in Australia. That's Bujar Hoxha. He's the country director of Care.